All right, we'll keep things moving along. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Ben and Shaun if they could come forward, please, and join the panelists. Now with Ben and Shaun, their bios are in the book. We're not going to read bios to them, but what we're going to have them do is they'll start the panel off and give us a little bit of an overview of their operation so you get to know them just a little bit. They get to choose what gets told about them. That's a heck of a deal instead of me doing it. So they're going to get that opportunity and tell you a little bit. But here's the key point now. This is where you all need to get involved, okay? There are note cards on your tables, various colors. We need you to start generating the questions that you want to ask these panelists. You've heard 3 of them speak. They should have made you think about some things, some challenges that we all face together. You're going to hear from Ben and Shaun shortly. They're going to tell some things to you. Write down those questions. If you've got one, hold it up. One of the committee members will grab it from you, and they'll get it up to me, and we can read those questions and get this panelist to provide information back to you. What we also want you to know is you're going to have more chances throughout this conference to visit with them, right? Many of them are going to be involved in other panels. There's going to be a speaker, coffee in the morning early. There's going to be different times to catch them. Please, they have granted us their time to be here. We need to use that fully and really learn as much as we can from them because we're going to be working toward tomorrow. Tomorrow is when we're going to try to figure out how we actually make a difference. We all work together on this and we'll keep driving that home. So it's really gather all you can. Questions at all as we get ready here for the panel? All right, let's do it. Mike, let's grab that if you want. Shaun, you want to go ahead and get started? Tell us a little about the operation.
How much time do you want me to spend on that?
I think if you take 5 or 10 and tell us a little bit about operation, and then we'll move on. Maybe shoot for 5. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for the introduction. My name's Shaun Grassel. Along with my cousins and I, we run cattle on about 4,000 acres, just up the river, about 10 miles or so on the Lower Brill Indian Reservation. And I also have a native grass seed production business. And I guess it's a little bit on how I got kind of into this. Our grandfather had the ranch, and he mainly raised cattle, and his cropland that he had, he always just had that put up on shares. And then when he passed away, a lot of the ground got kind of split up among all of his heirs, and it was all rented out to different neighbors. And then kind of over time, some of the neighbors decided, well, they didn't really want to farm it anymore or ranch some of it. And on the farming side, you get on these river bottoms, the soils are pretty light, and the guy who was renting it always would say, "Oh, you can't make a living down here. These soils are too light. Just can't raise a crop or anything." And on the ground that my mother inherited, he said he didn't want to inherit, or he didn't want to work it anymore. And he said, "Well, the best thing for that ground is it should just be put back to grass. And you might want to think about raising native grasses on it for seed." And so it kind of became an opportunity to do something. I'm a wildlife biologist by training. I was a wildlife biologist at Lower Brill for about 25 years. And when faced with an opportunity of working your family's land, it was something I really wanted to do. And so with assistance of NRCS, started thinking about what type of grasses to raise and why. And I wanted something that was versatile. So something that I could harvest seed off of, but also provide wildlife habitat, provide grazing opportunities for cattle. And so kind of jumped in with both feet and started raising big blue stem and also some side oats and western wheat in different places. It's something that when I first got into it, and it's been mentioned before, even though this land has been in our family for 5-6 generations or whatever, it was basically like starting over. And so I didn't have equipment. I grew up around farming and ranching all my life. Knew enough to probably just get myself into trouble and go into debt. But when I saw working or doing something with native grasses, to me it was something that I could do a lot of myself. Hire the conservation district to plant it. I do my own weed control. Then I harvest it and dry it and bag it. And so it's a kind of a small scale operation. And so a lot of the equipment that people are parking in the trees, and retiring, or some of the equipment that I'm looking for often and putting to use. It is a lot of sweat equity because you're using shovels and bagging things up yourself. But it was something that I was able to do on my own with little help, with contracting out or getting custom agriculture involved. And it was also a way to integrate the livestock portion of my operation. And so work closely with NRCS and trying to always do something with improving soil health. And so I'll give you an example of what a typical year might be. And so far there really hasn't been one, because every year I'm kind of doing something different, depending on if it's dry or if there's good precipitation, and what my cow numbers are and things like that. But a typical year, do some weed control, harvest the grass. Right, I'll back up 1 minute. This last year, our rains came late, and so if it's a dry year, I'll quite often just cut it early and put it up for hay. And in a good year, you can make just as much money on hay than you can on grass seed. But this last year, I put a lot of the big blue stem up for hay, and then our rain started to come in late June or July, and big blue stem, it just pops right back. And by late summer, it's 5 feet tall and putting on really good seed. And so I was able to take a seed crop off of it. And then I let it stand, and it provided wildlife habitat all winter long. And then just this last weekend, I started knocking it down and baling up what it was essentially just straw. And so I have straw for bedding for the cattle. And so that's not always the typical year. Like I said, some years I just bale it if it's dry. Some years, if it looks good, I'll just let it go to seed and harvest the seed. Something I did 2 winters ago is I put a bunch of cows on it in the wintertime, and I fed my cattle on it to try to get manure back in the system and just improve soil health. We've also done some burning on some of those fields to rejuvenate some of the grasses, to increase production, to kind of clean up some of those cool season annuals that start to show up in the spring. So a lot of those things are just part of the operation, but it's a little bit different every single year, and I'm always looking forward to how to best integrate cattle into that, how to maintain wildlife habitat into what I'm doing, and then also try to become more efficient with the use of my time when trying to reduce the amount of time that I'm spending out there. I tell folks a lot that I used to hunt a lot, I used to fish a lot, but now all I'm doing is putting up hay and bagging seed in the fall. And anyway, so I'm constantly looking at ways to just kind of free up my time. There have certainly been ways to do that. So I think I'll stop there.
Doesn't seem like I'd need notes to introduce myself, but it's a big room, so. My name's Ben Jules. My wife Lacey and I, along with our 2 boys who are 7 and 3 years old, run a custom grazing business in the far northwest corner of South Dakota. I'm the 4th generation on the ranch, kind of partially removed. In the early 2000s, my dad dropped out and wound up selling the cows and most of the equipment. We moved off the place and it was leased out. I viewed that for a long time as a tragedy, but it's turned out to be a huge advantage in getting to where I am now. It gave me an opportunity to work on a lot of different operations through high school. My wife and I moved out to the ranch in 2013 after we went to college, and then took over the lease and started operating the place in 20. I got a story that I like to tell about how I kind of got started out, and of course I was trying to make a plan in the years before that of how I could take over the lease and operate, and I'd been talking to a lot of different people around the area about how I could set up the operation and things I could do, and that was when I went to visit with Ray and Linda Gilbert. They're really good land stewards, and they've got a lot of respect for their operation, so I was wanting to get their advice on some numbers I was running, and I really felt like if I could figure out the numbers, I could do it. I could figure out what way I needed to go. And when I left there, I was feeling kind of discouraged. I didn't think I'd gotten to talk about what I wanted to learn, and I was driving down the road, and it just hit me, and I realized that all we talked about was grass, and that was one thing that I wasn't taking into account, is what was good for my grass and what I could do for my grass, and how to really take advantage of that. And Linda happened to be on the board of the South Dakota Grasslands Coalition at the time, so she got me hooked straight up with the grazing school, and that really helped me get some focus and momentum to get started. Since we got going, we've had a lot of trial and error. We've had different classes of cattle and different herd sizes. We've went from direct ownership and year-round grazing to taking in cattle in the summertime and taking in cattle in the wintertime. It's taken a lot of infrastructure to get from the 5-day moves or week moves that we kind of started out with to the daily moves we're working with now. We just tried to keep finding out what worked for us and get away from what didn't work for us. And last summer took in 1,100 head of yearlings. Our stocking rate has really improved since we started, as our management knowledge has improved and our infrastructure along with it. Try to stay focused on ecological improvements and keeping our overheads to a minimum while maintaining livestock performance. We set the ranch up in quarter-mile lanes so that I can temporary fence across that. All of our interior fences now are single wire on fiberglass posts to keep the costs low, and we've utilized the NRCS a lot for a cost share and World Wildlife Fund. Put in 11 new tire tanks on the place since I started, and a new well that really helped up the stocking rate. We've also had to get creative with portable water and truck and drinker that we can move around. Now with our single day high impact grazing, less than 1% of the ranch is utilized for one day out of the year. We try to maintain pretty unconventional management, stay holistic. It looks a lot different than a normal operation that you'd see. We try and focus on the grass as a commodity versus solely relying on livestock production. And that's allowed us to be financially sustainable since starting an operation from the ground up. And we have seen and continue to expect to see real positive ecological changes. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you so much to Shaun and Ben for sharing a little bit of your story. We got questions coming in. That's great. Everybody, I'll try not to drop them. But please write some more down, get them to one of the members, and we'll get them up here. So first, if we could pass the mic down to Don. I'm going to address this one specifically to Don. Don, the question is, what is the key to someone being receptive to a soil health discussion?
If you figure that out, I'd like to know too. I tell you what we have found in my experience as we've moved forward into supporting the regenerative space with our legacy program is those farmers and ranchers that have been doing it for a long time. They're looking for good partners all the time, and we found if we can contextualize the discussion in the terms of, who can we partner with you? Are we part of that partnership? Is somebody like Freedom Financial part of that partnership? Is it a grazing coalition, Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, Fish and Wildlife? Wrapping partners around these operations that are fairly traditional and may have heard of regenerative and they're just not quite sure about it. To get them to the room, to get them to the table, to talk about it. We've had good luck with the partnership angle. And that's why we've really tried to focus on the partnership angle is let's go in as a partnership whole and talk to these operations and let these operations know in a comfortable space that we're not trying to shove a new recipe down your throats. We're trying to talk to you about the challenges you're facing, where you're at with your operation, and if you're ready to sit back and have a different mindset shift and make some changes, well, then we've got a whole host of partners here that are here to help you. And so we've had pretty good luck with that. I've likened it to rolling a boulder uphill for the past 3 years when we started our legacy program, but it's a boulder worth rolling. So.
Very good, thank you. Lyle, you're next. Somebody wants to have you build a little bit on some of the things that you talked about. So here's the question. Is the solution better subsidies for PRF or something else?
I would tell you that PRF, if you buy PRF and keep it enforced, your ROI, return on investment, is going to be positive. I can prove that in just about every one of my clients. You know, you can't, I've learned you cannot take away, you know, we crop farm and we ranch. And you know, there's been talk about there's only so many dollars to go around for crop insurance. So how about if we take some of that 79% away from the crop guys and shift it over to the non-crop, the livestock? Well, that doesn't work. Their stick's a lot bigger than ours. And I would say, first of all, education as to what is out there right now for safety net. You know, PRF is a relatively new product. I shouldn't say relatively new compared to the crop side of it. But we still are, I doubt we're even close to 50% of the acres in South Dakota that are covered by pasture range and forage. That's number one. Number two, LRP, livestock risk protection. Same thing, it's a subsidized product that provides a safety net for people that want to mitigate some of the risks they've got with their livestock, be it feeder cattle, fat cattle, wean calves. So there are products out there. Increase in subsidy on that would be extremely helpful. I will say, you saw me put up the slide with the Grasslands CRP. That has been a huge benefit to a lot of ranch families. And so I applaud RMA, FSA and USDA for coming forward with that product. But we still have got a ways to go, because the success of CRP today in terms of acres, when they talk about the number of acres that are covered under CRP, if it wouldn't be for Grasslands CRP, the acres would be pretty dismal, because the crop acres don't, you know, they tend to be going down and the grassland acres going up. So I would say if the subsidies would be greater, the participation most certainly would be, but you're going to have to find the money to do it.
Very good. Thanks, Lyle. Could you pass the mic down to Ben? Ben, the question is what set of circumstances might lead you to own cows again?
Better timing in the market cycle, and I guess my goal probably, and maybe even looking back at it more, was to build my soil and my carrying capacity and my infrastructure to the point where I could own cattle and be sustainable before I was ready to own cattle. And so that's kind of the direction I've taken it.
Very good, thank you. If you'd hand the mic to Shaun. Shaun, I'm going to let you start with this, but I think other panelists might want to address this question as well. This comes from a producer, and the question is, what you know now, what suggestions/recommendations would you have for a young grass-based producer?
Oh man, I ask questions. I'm the type of person that'll ask a lot of questions, and so I've made a lot of mistakes. But I think it was mentioned earlier too in one of the talks, just ask questions, ask the people who are knowledgeable in these fields, because there are a lot of unknowns and uncertainties and things that you haven't thought of that you need to think of and be aware of. So yeah, just don't be afraid to ask questions.
Great. Anyone else want to address that? Lyle's got his hand up.
Well, I've said there's two ways that you can move the needle in conservation. One is through the market, and the other is through the soil. And I would tell any young producer, you need to explore both of those. Is there something that you can be doing to get paid for that you currently are not? Are you sequestering carbon and are you getting paid for it? Are you producing a product that's got a story? That's what America is looking for. They're looking for a story when they spend their food dollar. And so you should look at, rather than just, I'm going to turn this bull out, well, maybe you should explore and find out, so what kind of bull should I be turning out? Is a Wagyu cross, is that profitable? Should it be a Scottish Highlander cross? I don't know. I'm just saying, you should be looking at your end market on the product that you're producing and try and do something other than just producing a commodity product and selling the third Friday in October every fall like Grandpa did and Dad did. That would be my suggestion.
Very good. Thank you. Nobody else wants to take that one? I'll ask this one. Should be fairly simple, I think. Are operations that implement regenerative practices eligible for crop insurance? That could be to anyone. It was just wide open. They didn't put a name on it.
You start down and then I'll pile on.
It's not necessarily the practices that determine the eligibility or not. It's really what the history of the operation's been and then what you're planning to do in that crop year. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. And what we're seeing in regenerative operations, whether they're just starting out transitioning or they're quite a ways along, is it seems like the ones that really figure it out are the ones that mix in the right thing, and they keep trying to match the operation to the land rather than try to force their operation onto the land as they were before. And so we see cash cropping, row cropping, that usually maintaining some part of a regenerative operation. It just might be a much different part, it might look different. Might be a much smaller part, and so the short answer is yes. You're not disqualified from federal crop insurance. It just depends on what you're doing in that year. Lyle, please.
Totally agree. The only thing I would tell you is you better know a little bit about what might disqualify you. For example, in my neighborhood, if we planted rye last fall, and our intention is to hay it or graze it this spring, we have to have 2 weeks between when it's terminated and when we plant. Otherwise, if you planted a standing rye, you're disqualified. Now, if you go east of here 2 hours, that's not the case. So you need to know the rules, but I agree with Don, regenerative agriculture does not disqualify you, but you better find out what the rules are.
Lyle, since you got the mic, I'm going to ask you one question here that people wanted to hear from you on. It said, how did you come to the mindset to pass your ranch to your son? What would you tell producers of your age who don't want to work on the succession plan?
Well, either you're going to work on it, or when you're dead, somebody else is going to. I mean, I'm pretty blunt about it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I just want whoever's on our ranch to make the same ones I do. So why wouldn't I want to? I think a lot of times it's a control issue. We have got a problem relinquishing control. And I'm going to tell you, it took me a while to understand that my son cannot build a fence as straight as I could. And you have to have a knee replaced before you figure some of that out. That maybe you just can't be out there all the time. But after they have to tear the fence out the first time because it isn't straight enough, then they figure it out. And so anyway, I guess to me that's where it's at, is you've got to be of the mindset of being able to relinquish control, and some people never do. They have to die before the next generation decides what to do. And at that point in time, I'm the president of the South Dakota Ag Land Trust. And unfortunately, what I see too often is 4 kids that one of them maybe would have taken over the ranch, but was never given the opportunity. Then when mom and dad no longer are in control because they died, guess what happens? It is sold to the highest bidder and becomes a development. And if you don't believe me, I just was reading the data that came out today. Go out in the Black Hills region, Pennington, Lawrence, Butte counties, and see what's happening. There are four of the 5 highest growth counties in the state of South Dakota. I just read the data this morning. 4 of them are in the Black Hills region. Why? Because, well, they're converting privately deeded land that was ranch land into development. And you talk to those ranchers out there. And why is that happening? In a lot of cases, because mom and dad did not get with the program and create that legacy for their family.
Thank you.
If you want to know more about Ag Land Trust, Tony Life is over here. There he is. Oh, there. You can talk to him.
Up higher, Tony. There you go. Perfect. Very good. Ben, there's a question from the audience. They wanted to know if you actually said that you move cattle in a 1-day rotation, and if you could talk just a little bit more about that.
I do move cattle daily now, have for 2 years, the last 2 years. It took a long time to get there with infrastructure and trying to get our labor low enough to where we could actually stand to get it accomplished. Yeah, and it was, we were kind of once a week to 5 days getting them moved. And then the next year we got to 3 days, and then we got kind of to 2 days and touching into 1. And every time we made a step faster moving, you could just see the progress in it, and we just couldn't go back. We had to figure out a way to get up to speed and be able to keep moving them cattle. And so that's kind of how we got there.
Very good. Thank you. This is a question that I think really could fit all of you, but maybe Shaun take a first crack at it. We'll see. Who knows? We'll just kind of let you guys decide. Trying to reach the goal of having 60% of grass operations working to protect their grasslands is kind of the lead-in. Farmers tend to know their break-evens, their costs, their forecasted revenues. Meanwhile, is the same true for ranches? So the question is this: how can organizations support that knowledge base for decision-making in ranching? I don't know why I gave that one to you, Shaun. That was not an easy one. I just knew you were up to the challenge. I could repeat that, yep. We're trying to reach the goal of getting 60% plus of grass operations working to protect their grasslands. Farmers tend to know break-evens costs and all of those things, forecasted revenues. Meanwhile, is that true for ranches? And so the question is, how can organizations support that knowledge base in decision-making in ranching? Really knowing that break-even side of things.
That's a good question. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that.
Here, you want me to try?
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, so for farmers, I'm thinking it's referring to crop farmers, usually know all the way down to like per the acre on profit or even per the bushel. For agency staff to be able to help the ranchers be able to get to that, we need to get down to the per acre and per the AUM on their operations. And there's quite a bit of new technology that's actually coming out, and so I think if we just know about that technology to be able to give it to producers when they come in, there's new apps that are now available that actually track every cost to the cow, and so then you know how much that one cow cost you throughout the whole operation. And then you can track it all the way through, know where that cow went on which fields, how much grazing happened on that field, and then you can tie it back to per the acre. And so you could actually start tracking your expenses all the way down to the per unit basis. And that would be what you just need to start with. You just got to know your current location, right? Back to my slides. You got to know all your costs and try tying that then back to the land, to the cow, because that's all the crop farmers are doing. They just know all their expenses that are going through their operation, and then they get to the end of the year, they know how much product they actually sold, and so then it's pretty simple closing accounting profit to be able to show then, okay, per bushel it cost me this much to produce corn, I sold it for this much, I made 5 cents a bushel, right? So that's all ranchers have to do, and it's tougher because you're moving those systems around and then you're splitting herds. But some of the apps that are now coming out could definitely help us out with tracking a lot of those expenses.
Ben, I'd add.
Yeah.
I think the other part of that question goes to, how do we support this continued mindset shift going on in ranches and grassland management? And I think every one of us can play a part in that by challenging those that we visit with. The best story I've ever heard was my father-in-law, and he was chasing, in his younger years, got the ranch, and he was chasing 1,000 cow herd. And didn't know why, but that's his goal. That's his strategic goal, is get to 1,000 cow herd. He finally got there, and he said, "Geez, why am I here? I'm about broke. My wife's about to leave me. I haven't taken a vacation, but I got my 1,000 cow herd." And he said he's driving down the road to Fargo, and he finally had an epiphany, and he said, I don't want 1,000 cow herd anymore. I want to make every acre profitable on my ranch. And that was 20 years ago. And now they're an award-winning regenerative ranch that has stacked enterprises, and their soil health is improving by double digits, and it's amazing to see the transformation. And the difference was the mindset changed. So every time I hear a rancher come in and they say, well, where are you trying to get to? I want the best black Angus cattle herd that I can get, and I want to grow that, and I want to make it 350 head. And I start challenging them. Why? What are you going to do when you get there? How's that going to do for you? What's going to be like for your children, your family, and whatnot? And we start that more challenging conversation and try to get back to getting that operator to think about, what am I trying to do? And ultimately trying to get them to, if you focus on the land and start matching that operation to the land, then ultimately you're on a different pathway that generally is a better pathway for you and your operation.
Thank you. So this question was addressed to Don and Lyle, but I think that really maybe anyone can jump in. So here's the question. How can the financial industry support a future that does not rely on generational transfer as the only model for a successful ranch transition over time?
Yeah, I can start there. I think the financial industry has to wake up to this. I think we're stuck in a rut and we need to wake up. We in Starring, we're trying to be a leading edge of that. Been talking to other bankers about kind of waking them up too and trying to bring them in from some partner banks that we have. But I think we can do a much better job of moving from historically where we've kind of become over time just that place to get a loan, right? That place to get your deposits, or that place to handle that type of stuff. And actually we'd be a much better strategic partner with all of the farms and ranches. And also be a linchpin with these agencies. One thing we've definitely noticed is there is a tremendous amount of support between all the agencies. I don't care what state you're in, but especially South Dakota and North Dakota. Nature Conservancy, Grazing Land Coalitions, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Ducks Unlimited, you name it, Natural Resources Trust. But it's confusing, guys. It's terribly confusing for the average ag operator out there to go, what programs are where? And I guarantee you 65% of the programs they're not aware of. So I think we can do a better job in the financial industry of being that central linchpin of the information, because we're meeting with them every year. We've got their financials. We kind of know what works, what doesn't. So we in banking need to get better about being that one-stop shop to say, these guys offer these programs, these guys offer these types of educational things, these guys offer these share programs. We're trying to step into that. We're just starting out, but the more banks that do that, I think the better.
Anyone else want to tackle that at all? Nope, they'll let you take it. Let's hand the mic down to Ben. Ben, This question just came in. In the switch from running yearlings versus pairs, did you run into any problems keeping the yearlings where they were supposed to be? And did you have to beef up your perimeter fence?
Some of the perimeter fence had to be improved. That's one big thing that, as far as barbed wire fencing, like I hardly even carry a stretcher in my outfit anymore. We've tore out all the barbed wire on the interior of the place, and it's single wire high tensile. So I've got a lot of supplies to put into the border fences. Unbelievably small amount of issues. I had 1,100 head of yearling steers riding and being silly in one group, and in the fall I found 2 in the neighbors. So
I'll add to that.
I'm not gonna take credit for starting the stocker operation that we currently have. We don't have quite as many as he was referring to, but it's been amazingly easy if you know how to put up poly wire. Before the stockers leave the corral, they know what a hot wire is. That's the start, that's the education. And you do get that occasional 1 or 2 that are difficult. Well, they maybe never leave the corral, and somebody else ends up blowing up. That's the first thing. But the other part of it is, how often are you handling yours? Daily?
daily, yep.
So you see, if you show up once a month versus once a day, I'm just gonna tell you, you can't believe how much easier they are. So, you know, moving for us, our ranch is fairly big from one end to the other. And the advantage to stockers is, if we wanna move them 6 miles the first week in May, that's not a problem. That's an hour-and-a-half job. You try and do that with cow-calf pairs. And I'm just gonna tell you, stockers have been a game changer for us.
Mentioning the poly wire, I thought I'd share a little bit of a failure on that as far as keeping cattle in and stuff. One year, took 150 head of replacement heifers from the neighbor in, and we just trailed them out of the feedlot, and they were, green grass took off fresh, and I trailed them out through the gate into our place and turned them right into a paddock that I already had set up, and we sat there for about 3 hours and put the fence back up 3-4 times, and just one would sniff it, and they either go back or they go forward, and sometimes they tear out the fence. But after that, 2 days and they're good to go.
So what we do, we start accumulating stockers shortly after the first of the year. They already know what it is, because we've got a permanent, maybe a pipe fence or guardrail or plank, whatever the case is. And there is on the interior of that fence, hot wire. Not that we need it, we just want to train them to what this is, because we've had the same experience. There's nothing like education that you pay for that really sticks with you.
We've had a lot of questions come in, both on folks that really want to be in grass operation, but they don't have any land being, coming to them. And then we've gotten some questions that are coming in from producers that have no successors. So here's a question. What about producers with no successors? Are conservation easements a good avenue? We are in an area with a high chance of development. Lyle, it sounds like it's a lead in for you.
Maybe I should have Tony answer the question. They most certainly can be an option. We've got people, Jim Falstick over here can tell you about firsthand how to use conservation easements in transition. And others have too. So is it a tool? Absolutely. And I would suggest if you really have a question how to use conservation easements in a transition situation, seek out Jim. He can tell you about how he's used it in his ranch.
Very good. I would point out one other thing too. Know that there's other resources out there. So this little book that I'm holding up is called Growing Connections. It might be available several places, but I know it's over at the NRCS booth. And in here are a couple pages about 2 programs that could help build some connections. One is a program that we called NOLO, non-operating landowners. So who are those people out there that own land, they're not operating it now, but they want to find a way to pass that on? So that's a way to connect. Maybe they just want some folks to graze their land now. Maybe they want somebody to take care of it better. Who all knows? But there's a connection there. And then the other one is the South Dakota Grazing Exchange, which was set up to try to help connect folks that needed grass and folks that had grass. So that could be the same example. I think it's building connections. But anyway, look at this book. There's a lot of information in here as well. Grab one and put it to use. Okay. I'm going to give this one to Shaun. Shaun, I keep throwing you ones that are maybe a little tough, but I want everybody to at least think about this on the way down. This person is asking us to get ready for tomorrow. If you needed one thing to change that could help your operation, but it's out of your control, but it's in somebody else's control, what do you think what would that be? So just to say it again, if there was one thing that could be changed that would help your operation, it's out of your control, but it's in somebody else's, what is that?
I don't know if this is the right way to answer this, but the cost of repairs. When you buy a piece of equipment, you can always buy something expensive and new with all the gadgets and everything. It's probably going to be reliable, but if you can't afford that, you buy a piece of used equipment. But when you start to factor in the cost of repairing that used equipment, it's sometimes, either or, whether you should take that step or, buy something brand new. But when it comes time to buy something new, then of course you usually have to finance it and go to the bank for all that kind of stuff. But I guess for what I found for my place, yeah, it's just the cost of repairs are some of those red flags that someone mentioned earlier when I look at some of my costs.
Very good, thank you. Hand that down the line, and if anybody needs me to repeat it, they do, but I just ask you to contemplate that question. One thing that we could change to make your operation better, but it's out of your control, but it's in somebody else's. What is it?
I think, and I'm probably not utilizing the resources that are available as well as I could be, but just like you talked about the grass, the exchange, finding a person that I want to work with that maybe has a similar mindset, and has the capital and stuff to give me enough cattle that I can do what I want to do with them, and just making those connections and trying to find a solid relationship to work with is a barrier for me.
Thank you.
I would say, get a little more specific. 60% of what we've got is grass that we rent. 60% of our grass acres are rented. And the number one limiting factor there is water development, out of our control. Unfortunately, it's at the end of the year, when your accountant says you need to spend money, the local John Deere dealer is the place to go rather than the guy with a backhoe and water tanks and water development. And it's unfortunate, but that's what a lot of ranchers that rent ground, I think, deal with. It doesn't take much to string up a strand of high tensile wire, time or money. But getting water to properly utilize the ranch and the resource is a problem, and sometimes it's out of our control.
Okay, I seen Don say he didn't have an answer for that, but Don, there's a question specifically addressed to you. And then we're going to come back down the line this way. So for Don, where are people getting their information from on grassland soil health in North Dakota? And is there enough of it out there?
Getting it from the agencies I mentioned. North Dakota Grasslands Coalition is doing a great job. There are many others, Natural Resource Trust, Nature Conservancy, Leopold, Ducks Unlimited, just various versions. We are partnering with those, trying to be a part of getting it out even further to our customer base and to our prospects in the communities that we're in. And is it far enough? No. I kind kind of mentioned in my presentation, there's that middle 60% that are pretty sitting kind of where they want to be. And we're trying to penetrate that middle 60% and get this information to them, but also get some action to start occurring in that space. Because we don't like what we see when we look where that's headed. So we want to be a part of getting in front of that, getting the information out there, getting the education, getting the resources, getting the partners, being a part of that, so that if change is going to occur, we can play a positive impact in that change.
Very good. I'll let you start with this question, then we'll come down this row because I think everybody could address this one. How do we get more producers to attend and participate in events like this? Looking at the attendance list, about 75% of the participants here are agency or organizational people, not producers. Without producer participation, there is no work for the agency and the organization personnel. So how do we get more producers attending events like this?
We've been trying to figure that out for 3 years. I'll just give you what we've gone through, and where we've had good luck and where we haven't. So we had really good luck with Succession School 3 years ago, coming right out of COVID when it's all shut down, and I think we benefited from people being sick of staying home and wanting to get to an event. But then it seemed like after that, it went down, and it kind of wanted to move to a video conference type environment. So now we've gone down that route of shortening from a 3-day to a 2 to now we're down to a 1-day and an afternoon. We're doing video conference. We've gone from more of a central location to more of a go out to the rural markets themselves, the little 100, 300, 500 person communities, and inviting them in there to try to get 30 of them, but then offering that video conference piece, the Teams piece, Zoom piece, in order to expand. So I'll be honest, we haven't figured it out right yet. But we're again trying to partner and then trying to learn and just keep pressing in on it. So I'll tell you, at the end of the day, to get to that middle 60%, what's really going to have to change is there's going to have to be some pain points. There just are. There's too much government subsidies, honestly, in that space, in certain areas, and there's too much tax code benefit to continue to buy equipment and get that benefit. And I'm not against any of that. I'm just saying, if you want really it to shift more regenerative and more practices, in that middle 60, we're going to have to deal with those at some point in time.
I think that was a very eloquent answer. In crop insurance circles, there was a $5 per acre benefit if you planted a cover crop. And participation was, nobody was motivated by that because the carrot wasn't big enough. So you either have a carrot or you have a stick. And I've encouraged, for example, FSA for a number of years, why don't you give points? We got land enrolled in CRP Grassland. Thanks a lot to my wife. My neighbor didn't qualify. You know why? He wasn't married. They gave points for that. But she is socially disadvantaged. Now, I'm not poking fun at that, but that got points that got the land enrolled in Grassland CRP that I couldn't have gotten. All right, so how do you do it? If you do a certain practice, you qualify for X number of points on applying for a ranking for conservation dollars. That's maybe one of the ways you can do it. I would tell Don you should give a discount on interest rates. I don't know that he could get his board of directors to agree to it, but he's nodding his head.
To get people to show up to these types of events, it's a challenge. I've been trying to do events since I was in college. I was a community assistant, and trying to get enrollment and participation was always a challenge. My biggest thing was building a connection one-on-one with that producer. I was a district conservationist in Butte County, and looking around, I'm seeing some of my producers are actually here today. But they were the producers that met with you in the field more often and talked to you, and when you had more of that connection with them in the field, they're more apt to then come and listen to you at a presentation. And just because they're not here doesn't mean they're not benefiting from this type of convention happening. We're all learning here today to take it back to those producers that can't be with us right now, to tell them what we learned here, and then be able to actually try getting it onto the field. So by agency staff showing up, I don't see it as a negative, because you're going back out and you're meeting with the producers that are more willing just to talk with you one-on-one than to actually just be here and listen to a few presentations and hopefully take something home with them. So that's my advice, at least.
That makes me think of a video I saw of Alan Savory addressing this same kind of a question. And he was telling a story about the first time he went up on the stage and was giving a presentation in front of a bunch of people. And he said he got to the end of it and he realized there was a puddle on the floor by his boot. He peed his pants. He was so nervous, and he said, "If I can get past that and keep doing this, you can too." And so that's why I'm here. I mean, we gotta open our mouths and say what we're doing. People think it's crazy, but I've got a county road that runs through the middle of my place, and I can guarantee there's been more traffic on it when my bunch of cows is along the road than there normally is.
Well, I think a couple of things. One is the topics need to be relevant, to the producer. Succession planning was mentioned. This winter there was quite a few, small town kind of gatherings about winter grazing, so I think that was very timely and kind of in the calendar. But also getting, producers to talk to their neighbors, folks like Jim and other folks up here on the stage that are, well respected and are kind of leading kind of the regenerative agriculture and being progressive. I think people want to hear from folks like them.
Very good, thank you. I got another question for you, but I'm going to take that question that you just all had to answer and I'm going to turn it around to all of you. So a whole bunch of you, according to the person that asked the question, are from agencies and organizations, and they're challenging us to get more producers here. So tomorrow, you should be able to answer by 12 noon what your organization or agency is going to do to get more producers to the grazing school and all of those events. So that challenge is back to you. Because it's great to learn from these folks, but we have to come out of here with some steps we're going to take. I know I'm hounding the bejeebers out of that, but I really feel like we can't walk out of here thinking that everything is good, we attended this session. That's not going to be good enough.
One thing I think that's important is when we have somebody that's got 1,100 yearlings. Bet we're back on. He just said he had a county road running through. People like to know what's going on. We ran as many as 2,000 and sometimes 3,000 sheep on our ranch, and we don't have one fence that holds sheep for 5 years. People like to come and see what are we doing. And so we have hosted numerous tours, and I think that's important. If we're doing something that's really out of the ordinary, it's really important to be open to what we're doing and share.
Thanks, Lyle. Victor, since you got the mic, question is could you tell the group real quick what are some of those apps that you were referring to that help you figure out your shoe size?
Sure. If you just Google farming apps on any platform, they'll pop up. I think I searched top 10 farming cost accounting apps, and there'll be some that are tied directly to just row crops, but there are some for livestock. And so when I was looking, I have a farm in Salem, South Dakota, and I struggle getting the data that I need to know my current location to be able to actually make any management changes that we need to make for row crops or even bringing livestock onto the acres. And so these apps now are tracking everything to the point where my cousin that hates doing math can sit in the tractor, and as he's putting a chemical or planting that seed, he can type in how much of that quantity he used and put a little dot down while in the tractor, and he'll send it to me, and so it'll give me all the costs and everything that happened for every operation. The livestock ones, there's a tag in their ear. I remember my dad using it. I can't remember the name of that software that was there, but that was 10 years ago now, so it's probably new. But every time that steer or heifer would come through the chute, oops, I died. Thank you. So there's a tag. Some of the softwares have a tag that goes inside the cow's ear. Every time it came through the chute throughout the year, my dad would wand it, and it would put all the information in. It would document its weight. It would document any vaccines that he gave it, and then he could tie the calf then to that cow, and so then he would have a generational report for the cow herd, and he knew exactly where the genetics came from throughout that whole time. And now the software is upgrading fast enough that you can tie then all the costs to that cow as well. So if you just get on to Google, it should be able to pop up more stuff you Google. YouTube is starting to put out quite a few of the reviews on it and actually showing the platforms and how you enter the data. So it's growing. Farming is changing. We're no longer, you just can't do this blind. We're data driven at this point. So you're going to have to catch up with it to be able to keep going strong.
Very good. There's a couple of these questions we'll be able to address really well tomorrow, so I'm going to kind of like shuffle them to the bottom of the pile, but we got just a couple minutes left before we move on, so I'm going to pose 2 questions, and then whoever wants to tackle these for just a few minutes will get there. So, land capital access for beginning farmers and ranchers. Is there a difference between new and legacy farms? That's one question. And the second question is advice for a new rancher that has not inherited any land. Is it feasible to begin as a new rancher with land prices and everything else going on?
I'd start on that first one because it's really exciting for me. So what we've seen is, in the traditional sense, no. You can't go buy the land, you can't go buy the tractors you need, the combines you need, the rakes, the balers, the swathers. You can't. If you're going to traditionally do that, the margins are too thin, and we can't stretch the debt long enough for a young new family to get started in it. You got to get some help somewhere. That's either a seller carry note from an operation, even if you're not their successor. Find one of those, or you got to inherit something, or there's got to be some other thing that helps you get started. But the exciting piece that we're seeing is in this regenerative space. We're seeing, and there's stories starting to pop out all over the place of young families with a couple kids in their 30s, and they're starting out on 10 acres, 40 acres, and they're integrating these stacked enterprises. It might be honeybees and a couple cows and chickens and whatnot, but they're making that work for them, and they're growing from there. It's exciting. It's the first time I've been excited in 25 years of banking this industry, where I'm actually starting to see young operators that actually have a chance of growing into themselves and supporting their family without inheriting a farm and ranch. I hope that's the future. I hope that's the start of a new future for young farmers and ranchers, is this regenerative space, because the traditional is just not happening.
Anybody else want to? Go ahead, Lyle.
I don't know that I can add anything to it other than, we've got to be thinking outside the box. And if you think you're going to do it the same way your dad or your granddad did it, and that took me a while to figure out that my son can't do it the way I did it. You got to be open. If you're the person that's got the property and got the assets, you got to be open to somebody else coming in and maybe doing things differently. And if you're someone coming in wanting to start farming and ranching, you've got to look at doing something different. I can give you, I've got a neighbor, and I'm not going to share his name, but if you call me and you want to call him and talk to him, it's fine. But he and his wife did not have a lot. They started 3 boys ranching, farming and ranching, 3 of them. And very little land was bought, but they figured out a way to do it. So don't give up. If that's really what you want to do, there are ways.
Very good. Ben, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think just to go along with both of what those guys said, starting small, and I would just say this regenerative and learning how to improve the ground, that's such a huge benefit to anybody that you might lease from in the future, and it's so exciting. There's actually something to be excited about. The old, I'm going to be a rancher, it's a hard way to make a living, and we don't make much money, but by God, it's a good life. Like, we're on a different path here, and people feel that, and they want to get on board. I think just going to grazing school and going to these places and learning, I think that's a great place to start.
Thank you. Well, folks, with that, I'm going to bring the panel to a close. Now, don't everybody get up and run off, because we got a lot to do yet. So there's a few things, but I want to just have you help me thank them for all that they did to speak and share their thoughts. So please.